Imagine unrolling a scroll thousands of years old and realizing that something written there would only happen centuries later. Sounds like a movie scene, doesn't it? But believe it, there are ancient prophecies that came true in such unbelievable ways that they still leave historians and scientists scratching their heads. First, it's worth noting, prophecies have always been part of humanity. From the Greek oracles to biblical prophets, through shamans of ancient tribes and wise men of the East, all of them in some way tried to decipher the future. But what really grabs attention are those cases where predictions seem to have leapt straight from the pages of history into real life. In this video, we'll explore some of these prophecies that defied time and, surprisingly, came true. Get ready. Some seem like coincidence, others sound like pure fate's synchronicity, and some are so specific that it's hard not to get chills. You'll learn about stories of empires predicted before they existed, catastrophes foretold long before they happened, and even modern inventions that seem to have been guessed by minds from centuries past. And the burning question is, were these prophecies merely the result of keen observation, or is there something beyond our understanding? Stick with me until the end, because the final revelation will blow your mind. And of course, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any dives into mysteries like this. Have you ever heard of the Oracle of Delphi? It was considered the voice of the gods in ancient Greece. Kings, generals, and even ordinary citizens traveled miles just to hear its enigmatic words. And believe it or not, some of these prophecies seem to have come true with frightening precision. One of the most famous cases was that of King Croesus of Lydia in the 6th century BC. Worried about the future, he asked the oracle if he should attack the powerful Persian Empire. The response was intriguing. If you cross the river, you will destroy a great empire. Excited, Croesus believed he would win easily. The problem? The empire destroyed ended up being his own. Picture the scene. A confident king leading his army, thinking victory was in his grasp. And in the end, the prophecy came true, but in a completely unexpected way. Coincidence or not, this story has echoed through the centuries as an example of how prophecies can be interpreted in different ways, yet still come to pass. And the most curious thing is that this wasn't an isolated case. Several leaders in antiquity made decisions based on vague words that seemed to predict inevitable events. It was as if history was already written, just waiting for the right moment to unfold. But what if I told you that it wasn't just kings and generals whose lives were guided by prophecies? Some also anticipated astonishing natural phenomena. Imagine living peacefully when suddenly someone announces that an entire city will be destroyed. And years later, it actually happens. That's exactly what we find in ancient prophecies related to natural phenomena. A striking example is found in the Bible, in the Old Testament. The prophet Amos, around the 8th century BC, is said to have warned of great tremors that would shake the region of Israel. For a long time, many saw this as just a metaphor, but modern archaeologists discovered evidence of a massive earthquake that indeed occurred around that time, devastating entire cities. In other words, the prophecy wasn't just symbolic. It described a real disaster. And it doesn't stop there. In other cultures, like among the Aztecs, there are accounts of priests who predicted the arrival of strange men from the sea, bringing with them the fall of an empire. Centuries later, Hernán Cortés and his Spanish conquistadors landed in Mexico, changing history forever. To the native peoples, it felt like the inevitable fulfillment of ancient prophecies. It's almost as if these records were warnings etched in time, waiting only for confirmation. Now the big question is, did these prophets have some kind of extraordinary perception, or were they simply reading signs in nature and history's cycles in a way we've forgotten? And I'll give you a heads up. The next example isn't about natural disasters, but about an invention that seemed like science fiction, predicted long before it existed. Now brace yourself for one of those stories that seem straight out of a science fiction book. Did you know that some ancient thinkers predicted modern inventions centuries in advance? It's almost as if they got a sneak peek into the future. A stunning example is Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century. In his notebooks, he sketched flying machines, war tanks, and even something that closely resembles a helicopter. Centuries later, all these inventions became reality. Of course, many say Leonardo wasn't a prophet, but a visionary with an extraordinary imagination. But let's be honest, it's as if he dreamed of technologies that would only be possible hundreds of years later. Another intriguing case comes from the writer Jules Verne, considered the father of science fiction. In his book, From the Earth to the Moon, published in 1865, he described a space journey with such detail that it's almost eerie. The spacecraft was launched from Florida, heading to the moon, with astronauts facing challenges very similar to those NASA would encounter a century later in the Apollo 11 mission. Coincidence or brilliant intuition? These examples show that some prophecies may come from extraordinarily creative minds that soar beyond their time. But the effect is the same. When the future arrives, it feels like they had already written the script in advance. And speaking of scripts written ahead of time, the next case involves a political prediction so specific that many still believe it was more than just luck. Now imagine this, someone predicting centuries in advance the rise and fall of entire empires. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But there are ancient records that seem to have done exactly that. One of the most discussed examples comes from the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. He described a vision of 4 great kingdoms that would arise successively on earth. According to many scholars, these kingdoms were Babylon, Persia, Greece, and finally Rome. The most curious part is that these empires indeed existed, one after the other, exactly in the order described. Now think about it. Was this just an interpretation made after the fact, or truly an accurate prediction of something yet to come? It's as if someone back then had written the manual for humanity's geopolitical future. Another case involves Nostradamus, the famous French physician and astrologer from the 16th century. In his enigmatic quatrains, he is said to have described the rise of Napoleon and even Hitler, using terms that many interpret as clear allusions to these leaders. The descriptions speak of a leader born near Italy and a young man from poor lands who would bring war to the world. For some, it's pure coincidence. For others, it's prophecy, plain and simple. And the most striking thing, even today, Nostradamus's texts are analyzed as if they hold clues about our own future. But if that already seems intriguing, just wait until you hear about prophecies that speak not of people or empires, but of cosmic events that changed history. Now hold on to this. Some prophecies don't talk about kings or empires, but about cosmic phenomena, events so grand they seem written in the stars. A remarkable case comes from the Maya. They were true masters of astronomy, observing the sky with astonishing precision, without modern telescopes. Through their calculations, they predicted solar and lunar eclipses centuries in advance. Imagine the impact of that at the time. People looking at the sky, the day suddenly turning to night, and all of it already predicted by the priests. For many, it was proof of supernatural powers. But it doesn't stop there. In various ancient cultures, there are records of omens linked to shooting stars, comets, and even explosions in the sky. The Chinese, for example, noted in their scrolls the appearance of a guest star in the year 1054. Today, astronomers know this was a supernova, the colossal explosion of a star, which left behind the Crab Nebula, still visible today. It's incredible to think that civilizations without advanced technology were already able to predict or record phenomena that modern science only confirmed much later. For them, these were divine signs. For us, they're evidence that careful observation could truly reveal the future. And that raises the question, could the prophetic gift often just be science disguised as magic? In the next segment, we'll talk about a prophecy so curious that it involves the end of the world itself. Now we're stepping into territory that always sparks controversy, prophecies about the end of the world. After all, who hasn't heard of apocalyptic predictions that left people on edge? The most famous case in recent times was the Mayan calendar. For years, it was believed that the Maya had predicted the end of the world on December 21st, 2012. Movies, documentaries, and even religious groups went into a frenzy, expecting cosmic catastrophes and the collapse of civilization. The curious thing is that in reality, the Maya weren't talking about the end of the world, but rather the end of a cycle, something like turning the page on a giant calendar. But the interpretation gained traction. and became one of the most talked about prophecies of the modern era. And it's not just the Maya. In the Middle Ages, several European prophets announced specific dates for the end of times. Some gathered crowds on mountaintops, waiting for an apocalypse that never came. And yet, new dates kept emerging, as if humanity had a constant need to imagine the final moment. The most intriguing part is how these predictions shape behaviors. Thousands of people changed their lives, sold their possessions, and quit their jobs, all believing in something that was written in the future. And here's the big question. Is the power of prophecies in what they say, or in how much we believe in them? In the next segment, we'll talk about a case where a prediction not only caused fear, but also helped save lives. Now check this out. There are prophecies that, instead of spreading fear, ended up saving lives. And one of the most curious cases happened in Japan in the early 20th century. In the city of Yungay, Peru, for example, there are reports that, before the devastating earthquake of 1970, some local elders spoke of ancient legends warning of disasters coming from the mountains. Many ignored them, but others believed and managed to escape to higher ground when the tremors began. The result? Those few survivors were precisely the ones who listened to the ancient stories. And in Japan, the belief in signs and omens has always been tied to nature. There are records that before tsunamis, some villages believed in messages from the gods, urging them to build monuments called tsunami stones. Huge stones inscribed with warnings not to build homes below that point. Centuries later, when new tsunamis struck the coast, the villages that heeded the warnings on the stones suffered far less destruction. Isn't that chilling? These cases show how ancient prophecies or legends, even if not mystical predictions in the literal sense, carried the accumulated wisdom of past observations. It was as if knowledge was passed down from generation to generation in the form of divine warnings. And so here's something to ponder. Could many of these prophecies actually be clever warnings, disguised as messages from beyond? In the next part, we'll dive into even more enigmatic territory, prophecies that seem to have predicted not only disasters, but also iconic historical figures. Now we come to those prophecies that seem tailor-made for historical figures, and believe it or not, some are so specific that they still spark heated debates today. A classic example is found in the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. Written centuries earlier, it mentions the name of a king called Cyrus, who would be responsible for freeing the people of Israel from captivity in Babylon. And guess what happened? When the Persian Empire conquered Babylon, King Cyrus, yes, with that exact name, authorized the Jews to return to their homeland. It's as if someone had dropped a spoiler for history centuries in advance. Another famous case involves Nostradamus again. Many believe he predicted the death of King Henry II of France. In one of his quatrains, he describes a young lion who will overcome the old in a field of battle, piercing his eyes through a golden cage. Years later, during a tournament, Henry II was fatally wounded by a lance that pierced the golden visor of his helmet and struck his eye. Coincidence or spot-on prophecy? These episodes fuel the idea that certain figures were destined to shape history, but of course skeptics argue that many prophecies are vague enough to fit various situations. And here's the challenge. Does the power of prophecies lie in the precision of their words, or in the interpretations we give them after the fact? Now let's wrap things up with a bang, revisiting the lessons these stories leave us, and making that final reflection that will stick with you. After journeying through prophecies that spoke of empires, natural disasters, futuristic inventions, and even the end of the world, we're left with an intriguing feeling. So, what do these predictions mean for us today? Perhaps the answer lies in the balance between mystery and knowledge. Many prophecies that seem magical may, in fact, be the result of brilliant observations, like the Maya who studied the sky with astonishing precision. Others, like those of Nostradamus or the Oracle of Delphi, remain shrouded in ambiguity, acting almost like mirrors. Each era reads in them what it most fears or desires. The most fascinating part is realizing how humanity has always sought clues about the future. Whether through the stars, dreams, symbols, or words written on scrolls, it seems we have a constant need to believe that destiny can be deciphered. And when one of these predictions does come true, even partially, the impact is so great that it echoes through centuries. So tell me, which of these prophecies impressed you the most? Do you believe some of them were truly visions of the future, or do you think it's all just well-interpreted coincidence? Share in the comments, give a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course, subscribe to the channel to keep exploring the greatest mysteries of history, science, and culture with me.